In this video, I'm going to talk about how to nail TikTok's top 10 interview questions. And I must say that I've had some surprisingly good results with people applying for job interviews with this company. Right? Question number one: if there's one thing you'd wish you could improve, what would it be? Right? So why would someone ask you this question in a job interview? If there's one thing you'd wish to improve, what would it be? They would ask you this because they want to ask you about your weakness. What's your weakness? Right? So there's many ways you could pitch your weakness, depending on the role, depending on the job description you're applying for, depending on what you're comfortable talking about. However, one golden piece of advice here would be to pitch your weakness with a great story. Right? Even if you use public speaking, no problem with that, so long you have a great story to back that up. Right? Number two question: tell me about the time when you did not have enough data to decide on something. How did you resolve the situation, and was it a good decision? Right? So why would someone ask you this in a job interview? Well, because they want to see how you deal with ambiguity, okay, ambiguous situations. And the challenge in explaining how to answer these interview questions it comes from the fact that it varies upon the role that you're applying for, right? So a director level role might deal different with an ambiguous situation than a software engineer, right? A director level role might have many levers to address these situations, such as, to delegate someone to find it out, or to commission some research, or simply to dive deep into the data. For a software engineer or for an analyst, if you want, it's a lot more straightforward. You just have to find the data, eventually document yourself on these things. But usually speaking, generally speaking, I should say, who does well with ambiguity, with dealing with ambiguous situations, also tends to do well in their job. So this is why the question gets asked, right? Number three: why TikTok? Right, and a very common interview question, if I may add. Of course, vast majority of people would apply for a job with TikTok because of it's a high-performing company. The level of growth this company has is amazing. Also, because of the salary. However, one mistake people do is that they over-compliment the company. Say, "You're amazing. You're fantastic. I'd love to work there. Please, please let me in." Right? Now, if you want to go on a more peculiar approach, you could also go something on the lines of, "Well, I'm not sure I want to join you just yet. I'm here to learn about the opportunity and to see on whether we can benefit each other in this role." Okay? So you could also show a bit of backbone, of course, also if your CV allows, but if you feel like you have a bit of leverage, a bit of negotiation power, show a little bit of commercialism if you want, and if your role is one such that this approach allows, then why not consider a peculiar approach, okay? TikTok is not a business that does things by the books. It's not a classic business. Every high-performing company will appreciate people with peculiar approaches, right? Next interview question: tell me about a recent conflict with someone on your team. Right? I want you to notice here the question, a recent conflict. Okay, so these are things with what's your worst failure? Tell me about a recent conflict. You shouldn't read too much between the lines here, and you shouldn't really focus on the most recent conflict, but rather the best story about conflict that you prepare for the interview. All right? Even if the question says the recent conflict. Okay, but the reason why someone asks you this in a job interview is because they want to screen you on your interpersonal skills, right? And what people mistake, the type of mistakes that the most common with these types of interview questions is when you put the blame on someone. You put the blame on your boss, on your colleague, on the company. You tend, to not take ownership of the situation. It's not take responsibility for the things involved. Or another huge mistake that people do nowadays would be to clone someone else's answer, or even worse, to clone an AI answer. Maybe I'll talk about this a little bit later as well, because it's a huge trend where people get disqualified from the job interviews from the start. Right? But long story short, interpersonal question, a conflict with someone, a conflict with your boss, time had a disagreement inside your team, and how did you resolve it? This is the type of question you should expect in job interviews with TikTok, as is with pretty much any high-performing company. And as previously said in the question with dealing with ambiguous situations, it very much depends on the type of role that you're applying for. The expectations would evolve. Right? Next question. Where do you see yourself in 5 years? Okay, so this is a typical HR question, right? And here, they basically, I'm sure you have plans. I'm sure you have a career trajectory that you have in mind, more or less. For example, it could be in an individual contributor role, in a manager level role, or something else. Okay, but these questions are types of questions you should expect, especially with HR people, and you should definitely prepare something, I would say, to go genuine, to be really genuine about what's your perspective in your career if you get the job, right? Next one, tell me about the time you took on something not in your direct area of responsibility, but definitely the company's best interest. Okay, so why would someone ask you this question? They would want to screen you on ownership, on whether you're someone who likes to take stuff that's outside of your area of responsibility because you see it could benefit the team or the company, right? And if you hear this question for the first time, it will be a little bit of a struggle to find an answer, So if you prepare it in advance, then the challenge will be to find the best possible answer to such question. People who avoid taking ownership will have a harder time to find the best story when they showcased ownership, right, in a job interview. Next one, tell me about the cross-functional collaboration. Okay, so whenever I ask this question to people I work with, some of you don't really understand what's a cross-functional team. So by cross-functional team, it simply means that working with people of different area of expertise than yours, right? So if you're a tester, you work with developers, with PMs, with directors, with customers, and whatnot, right? And the moment you understand, what a cross-functional collaboration means, you automatically also have a better perspective on what's the difficulty, what's the challenge in cross-functional collaborations. And one of the big challenges here would be to communicate to various types of audiences, right? So if you're a back-end software engineer, you will find it a bit challenging to communicate with someone in an executive role, right, with the director. Similarly, if you're a tester, you will have a hard time explaining some complex testing procedure to a customer, right? And this is why you should think about examples when you successfully collaborated. You had a successful cross-functional collaboration, and how do you work with people of different subject matter expertise. And by the way, don't think you're alone in having difficulties collaborating cross-functionally, because this happens at any seniority type of role. Both for individual but also for manager level types of roles, right? So cross-functional collaboration, also think about something here, right? Next one, what is one project that you're most proud of? Right, so to translate this question, what's your best story that you prepared for the interview? And this is usually one of the first questions you might get asked in a job interview with TikTok. That's simply because they want to have a starting point for a conversation. Maybe they want to perform a deep dive. Maybe they want to do a backbone test with you. But long story short, it's a very efficient way to find out if someone prepared the interview or not. Okay, because if you prepare the interview, you will quickly realize, hey, that's the best story I have. I should definitely go with this one, right? Also, when you're talking about the best story, again, try to find what's the best story that you would want to use with this specific interviewer. Because sometimes, the different types of audiences will find different types of story as the most compelling, given the role that that you have and given the role that you're applying for, right? So what's your most successful? What's the project you're most proud of? If you prepare your interview, that will not be a challenge. How do you manage stress in a fast-paced environment? Okay, so how do you manage stress in a fast-paced environment? Working under pressure, this should come as no surprise. Probably the more challenging aspect is how do you answer this type of question, because I assume nobody's going to answer this. I hate stress. I don't like working under stress, and I hope this job is without stress, right? So to be clear. But what you should understand here is that the way the question is formulated, how do you manage stress or how do you handle stress, and even further in a fast-paced environment, it's a bit counterintuitive, but it's still a behavioral type of question. Tell me about the time when you manage stress successfully in a fast-paced environment or a critical aspect of your job, right? And therefore, it should become more clear and more evident on what's the best way to answer these types of questions. That is with great examples of a time when you worked well under stress, right? When you had a tough deadline, when you had to provide something on short notice, which was critically important for the business or not, but really you must show skills that resonate with people who do well under pressure, right? So again, it's a behavioral type of question, even if the question is how do you manage stress? Okay, tell me about time when you managed a stressful situation. I'm sure there's plenty of examples you could pick from here, only if the moment you understand why the question gets asked, right? And finally, how do you resonate with TikTok's or Byte Dance's values? Okay, so I added this last question because I wanted to test you on whether you know them or not, because in my experience, most people don't know them. And I believe it would be a useful thing for you to prepare going into a TikTok interview. So these would be my top 10 interview questions that I had prepared for an interview with TikTok. I hope you found this useful, and thank you very much for watching.